The house was still, save for the muffled hum of a distant television in the den. Shadows stretched long across the living room, where Luna, our chocolate Labrador, lay sprawled near the hearth. Her amber eyes flickered open as a creak sounded from the back door, a sound too deliberate to be the wind. It was the kind of noise that sent a chill racing up your spine, the kind that whispered something was very wrong. I was upstairs folding laundry, oblivious to the brewing tension below. My teenage son, Ethan, was supposed to be doing homework in his room, but I knew him better than that. His music was likely blaring through his headphones as he scrolled on his phone. My husband, Greg, had texted earlier saying he'd be late again, a work dinner or some other excuse that had grown too common in the last year. It was just another ordinary night in a household that had begun to feel fractured in ways I couldn't quite articulate. And then Luna barked. Not the casual, alert the mailman kind of bark, but a deep, guttural sound that reverberated through the walls. It was a bark filled with urgency and something more, fear. I froze mid-fold, a dish towel clutched in my hands, my pulse quickening. Luna rarely barked like that. She was a calm dog, almost eerily so, as if she carried an old soul in her sturdy frame. "Ethan?" I called, my voice tight. "Did you hear that?" No response. I dropped the towel and made my way downstairs, the air colder and heavier with each step. Luna stood rigid at the base of the stairs, her ears pricked and her gaze locked on the back door. She growled low in her throat, the fur along her back bristling. The sight of her like that, a dog who had never so much as growled at a passing stranger, made my stomach twist. I followed her gaze, and that's when I saw it. The silhouette of a man framed in the glass panel of the door, his hand gripping the knob. My heart thundered as I fumbled for my phone, but before I could unlock it, the door clicked open. The intruder stepped in, his face obscured by a hood. Luna barked again, louder this time, her body poised like a coiled spring. My instinct was to scream, but my voice failed me. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I whispered, "Get him, girl." Luna lunged. It was a blur of fur and chaos, the sound of snarling and a man's panicked shouts. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet as Luna snapped and barked, her jaws just inches from his leg. He wasn't prepared for a dog like her, a protector disguised as a family pet. He scrambled to his feet and bolted, slamming the door shut behind him. By the time I called the police, my hands trembling as I recounted the events, Luna had settled back into her spot by the hearth, her tongue lolling out as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had shifted. Luna wasn't just a pet anymore. She was a protector, a guardian who had sensed something in the man that I couldn't, a malice, an intent that would haunt me for weeks to come. When Greg came home later that night, he dismissed my story with a weary wave of his hand, saying, "It's just a dog doing what dogs do." But Ethan saw it differently. He knelt by Luna, stroking her fur and whispering, "Good girl." For once, he put his phone down, his attention entirely on her. It wasn't until days later, when I found a screwdriver left behind near the door, that I realized how close we had come to something far worse. And as the weeks unfolded, I began to notice how Luna seemed to know things no ordinary dog could sense. She wasn't just a pet. She was something more. And the night she saved us was only the beginning. The days after the attempted break-in felt surreal. I couldn't shake the image of Luna, standing guard with a determination that defied her typically gentle demeanor. She became the silent sentinel of our household, shadowing Ethan and me like a furry guardian angel. Greg, ever the skeptic, dismissed her behavior as coincidence. But I knew better. Something had shifted, and I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that Luna's intuition might be sharper than all of ours combined. That's why, when I first noticed Luna acting strangely around Dana, our nanny, I paid attention. Dana had been with us for nearly a year, hired when I took on a part-time consulting job to help with our bills. She was perfect on paper, glowing references, a sweet demeanor, and an uncanny ability to keep Ethan's younger sister, Claire, entertained despite her physical challenges. Claire, born with cerebral palsy, required constant care, and Dana had seemed like a godsend. But then came the subtle signs, things I might have dismissed if not for Luna. It started with growls. Quiet ones at first, whenever Dana entered the room. Luna would position herself between Dana and Claire, her eyes never leaving the nanny. Dana laughed it off, joking that Luna must have had a bad experience with someone who looked like her. I wanted to believe her, but Luna's behavior only escalated. She began barking whenever Dana touched Claire's wheelchair, her tail stiff, her ears pinned back. "She's just protective," Dana said one afternoon, brushing her auburn hair behind her ear with a forced smile. "It's sweet, really." But it wasn't sweet. It was unsettling. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I found myself sitting on the couch, replaying moments in my head. The way Claire had flinched when Dana adjusted her leg braces the other day. The uncharacteristic silence when I'd asked Claire how her afternoon had gone. At the time, I'd chalked it up to fatigue or discomfort from her therapy sessions. Now I wasn't so sure. I confided in Greg that night, hesitantly bringing up my concerns. "You're reading too much into it," he said, barely looking up from his laptop. "Dana's great with Claire. You've said so yourself. And Luna's just being Luna." His dismissal stung, but it wasn't unexpected. Greg had a knack for brushing off anything that didn't fit neatly into his worldview. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. The following week, I decided to work from home under the pretense of a scheduling conflict. I wanted to observe Dana, to see if my suspicions held any weight. It wasn't long before I noticed the cracks. She was short with Claire, her voice tinged with irritation whenever she thought no one was listening. She handled her roughly, tugging at her arms to position her in the wheelchair rather than guiding her gently as I'd instructed. When Claire spilled juice on the table, Dana's smile vanished, replaced by a venomous whisper. "You're useless, just like your mother." I froze, the words hitting me like a slap. From my hidden spot in the hallway, I watched as Dana cleaned up the mess, her movements jerky and aggressive. Claire's face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She just sat there, small and silent. My heart ached with guilt. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? Luna, ever watchful, growled low from her spot near the couch. Dana glanced over her shoulder and muttered, "Stupid dog," before turning back to Claire. That night, I couldn't sleep. I debated confronting Dana, firing her on the spot. But something held me back, a gut feeling that there was more to uncover. If I acted too soon, I might never get to the bottom of what was happening when I wasn't around. The next morning, I set up a small camera in the living room, hidden among the books on the shelf. I told myself it was for Claire's protection, to gather evidence in case Dana tried to deny her actions. It felt invasive, but I needed to know the truth. What I saw over the next few days shattered me. Dana's cruelty wasn't limited to harsh words. She yanked Claire's hair while brushing it, calling her a little brat under her breath. She shoved food into her mouth too quickly during meals, ignoring Claire's struggles to chew. And then there were the things she said, awful, cutting remarks about Claire's disability, her appearance, even her race. "You'll never be anything more than a burden," Dana sneered one afternoon as Claire sat silently in her chair. "Your kind never are." I clenched my fists, anger bubbling to the surface. I couldn't fathom how someone could harbor such hatred, let alone direct it at a child. I wanted to storm into the room, to drag Dana out of my house and never look back. But I needed Greg to see this for himself. He needed to understand why I hadn't been overreacting. That night, I showed him the footage. His face darkened as he watched, his jaw tightening with every passing second. When the video ended, he stood abruptly, pacing the room. "We're calling the police," he said, his voice low and firm. "She's done." But it wasn't that simple. Dana had our address, our routines. I worried about what she might do if she felt cornered. We decided to confront her together the next morning, to terminate her employment and ensure she left without incident. When the time came, Greg and I stood side by side in the kitchen, waiting for Dana to arrive. My heart pounded as the front door opened and she walked in, her expression shifting to confusion as she saw us. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice overly casual. "We know," Greg said, his tone leaving no room for ambiguity. "We've seen what you've been doing to Claire." Dana's face paled, but she quickly recovered, her lips curving into a defiant smirk. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone, showing her a snippet of the footage. Her expression faltered, and for a moment, I saw fear in her eyes. "You can't prove anything," she spat, backing toward the door. "This will ruin your lives, not mine." Before I could respond, Luna stepped forward, her body tense and her teeth bared. Dana froze, her bravado crumbling under the weight of Luna's unwavering stare. "Get out," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "No." Dana left in a rush, slamming the door behind her. I called the police immediately, sharing the footage and filing a report. Claire stayed close to Luna for the rest of the day, her tiny hands buried in the dog's fur as if drawing strength from her. In the days that followed, I couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if Luna hadn't been there to alert me. She had seen what I hadn't, sensed the danger lurking beneath Dana's polished exterior. And as I watched her curl up beside Claire that night, I realized that Luna wasn't just a protector, she was a savior. But as the relief settled in, a new worry took its place. If I could miss something so insidious in my own home, what else might I be blind to? And what would I do if Luna couldn't protect us next time? Luna's low growl sliced through the silence of the living room, a sound so primal and deliberate that it made me stop mid-sentence. It wasn't the playful grumble she reserved for Ethan's teasing or the sharp bark she used to scare squirrels away from the garden. This was different, a warning, a declaration that something wasn't right. It was late afternoon, the kind of time when the house felt almost too quiet. Claire was in her wheelchair by the bay window, gazing out at the bare trees. Dana, our nanny, was seated at the table, scrolling through her phone. The soft click of her nails against the screen was the only sound in the room. At first, I couldn't figure out what had triggered Luna's reaction. She stood stiffly, her body angled between Claire and Dana, her teeth bared ever so slightly. Her eyes darted between the two of them, sharp and unyielding. I dismissed it as Luna being overprotective again, though her posture set me on edge. "Luna, tush," I said, my voice soft but firm. She didn't move, her growl deepening instead. Dana glanced up, her expression flickering with annoyance before she smoothed it into a polite smile. "Honestly, she's got such a temperament sometimes," she said with a forced laugh, standing and moving toward Claire. "Come on, Claire. Let's get you ready for your bath." Luna barked, a sharp, sudden sound that made both Dana and me flinch. She lunged forward, planting herself firmly in front of Claire's wheelchair, her eyes locked on Dana with a ferocity I'd never seen before. "Luna, stop." I stepped forward, my heart racing. "What's gotten into you?" Dana hesitated, her hand frozen mid-reach for the wheelchair's handles. Her face, usually so composed, betrayed a flicker of something, fear or perhaps guilt. "She's just being territorial," Dana said quickly, taking a step back. "Maybe she doesn't like me touching the chair." But Luna's growl didn't let up. It was as if she could sense something deeper, something I couldn't see. That night, after Dana left, I replayed the scene in my mind. Luna's reaction had been too precise, too deliberate. She hadn't barked at the mailman or growled at a neighbor passing by. She had fixated on Dana, her instincts honed like a blade. The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I felt. What if Luna was seeing something I wasn't? I decided to keep a closer watch. The following morning, I made an excuse to stay home again, telling Greg I had a client meeting over Zoom. I settled in at the kitchen table with my laptop, but my real focus was on the living room, where Dana was helping Claire with her physical therapy exercises. At first, everything seemed normal. Dana's voice was calm and measured as she guided Claire through the stretches. "Good job, sweetheart. Just one more," she said, her tone syrupy sweet. But then, when Claire's hand slipped from the exercise band and the resistance snapped back, Dana's mask slipped. "For God's sake, Claire," she snapped, her voice sharp. "Can't you do anything right?" I froze, my hands hovering over the keyboard. Claire's face fell, her eyes darting to the floor. But before I could intervene, Luna stepped in. She padded into the room silently, her posture low but deliberate. Her presence was unmissable, and Dana's eyes flicked toward her with thinly veiled irritation. "Not you again," Dana muttered under her breath, turning back to Claire. She crouched down, grabbing Claire's wrist with more force than necessary. "Let's try this again, and don't mess it up this time." Luna growled, a low, menacing sound that seemed to fill the room. Dana froze, her grip on Claire loosening. Luna stepped closer, her ears flat against her head, her body taut and ready to spring. The message was clear: back off. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Everything okay in here?" I called, stepping into the room. Dana's head snapped up, her expression shifting to one of forced cheerfulness. "Of course," she said, standing quickly and smoothing her skirt. "Claire just had a little slip. Nothing to worry about." But I was worried. And as I looked at Luna, still standing protectively by Claire's side, I knew she was too. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind churned with questions. Why had Luna reacted so strongly? What was she picking up on that I couldn't see? I thought back to the other times Luna had shown unease around Dana. The growls, the way she always positioned herself between Dana and Claire. It wasn't random. Luna knew. The next morning, I decided to test a theory. When Dana arrived, I deliberately stayed in the kitchen, pretending to be engrossed in a phone call. I left the door ajar, giving me a clear view of the living room where Claire sat playing with her building blocks. Luna lay nearby, her head resting on her paws but her eyes alert. Dana walked in, her cheerful facade firmly in place. "Good morning, Claire. Let's get those blocks cleaned up, shall we?" Claire hesitated, her hands pausing mid-stack. "I'm not done yet," she said softly. Dana's smile tightened. "Well, you are now," she said, reaching down and sweeping the blocks into a basket. Claire flinched at the abruptness of the motion. And then it happened. As Dana leaned closer, her voice dropped, her words barely audible but unmistakably cruel. "You're such a little mess, you know that? Always making things harder for everyone." Before I could react, Luna was on her feet. She barked sharply, her body tense as she placed herself between Claire and Dana once again. This time, there was no mistaking her intent. She wasn't just protecting Claire, she was challenging Dana. Dana straightened, her face pale. "This dog is out of control," she said, her voice shaky. "You need to do something about her." But I wasn't listening. I was watching Claire, who reached out and rested her small hand on Luna's fur, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks, relief. That evening, after Dana left, I sat with Greg in the living room, showing him the footage I'd captured on my phone. His reaction was immediate and visceral, his jaw tightening as he watched Dana's true nature unfold before us. "I knew something was off," he said finally, his voice low. "Luna's been trying to tell us this whole time." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I should have listened sooner. The next day, we confronted Dana, terminating her employment and handing the footage over to the authorities. But even as the door closed behind her for the last time, I couldn't shake the lingering fear. She had been in our home, caring for our daughter, while hiding a darkness we had failed to see. And yet, through it all, Luna had known. She had seen the evil lurking behind Dana's smiles and had acted without hesitation. She had protected Claire when we couldn't, proving that she wasn't just a dog, she was a hero. As I watched Luna curl up beside Claire that night, I realized something profound. Trusting her instincts wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. Because in a world where evil often hides behind closed doors, we needed every bit of light we could find. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The day it all came to a head started like any other. I remember how normal it felt, the way Claire's laughter filled the house as she played with her favorite stuffed bear by the bay window. Ethan was upstairs, likely glued to his gaming console, and Luna was stationed beside Claire, her usual position when the nanny was around. Dana was late, and while I tried to brush it off as traffic or a scheduling mix-up, a part of me was relieved to have a little more time without her in the house. When Dana finally arrived, the air seemed to change. Luna stiffened the moment the door opened, her sharp gaze tracking Dana's every move. Dana greeted me with her usual sugary tone, but there was something off, a nervousness in her eyes, a clipped edge to her voice. She muttered something about car trouble as she brushed past me, heading straight for Claire. "I'll take over now," she said, her smile brittle. I nodded, though my stomach twisted with unease. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to be preoccupied with bills. In truth, I was on high alert, listening for any sound that might hint at trouble. Luna's growls had been escalating over the past week, and I knew better than to ignore her instincts. But today, something about the tension in Dana's movements told me that things might take a darker turn. It happened during Claire's afternoon therapy session. From my spot in the kitchen, I heard Claire's soft giggle turn into a whimper. I froze, my heart hammering as Dana's voice rose, sharp and impatient. "Hold still, Claire. You're making this impossible." I stepped toward the doorway, peeking into the living room just in time to see Dana yank Claire's arm roughly as she tried to adjust her posture in the chair. Claire winced, tears pooling in her wide eyes. Before I could intervene, Luna sprang into action. The Labrador moved like a bolt of lightning, her body low and powerful as she positioned herself between Claire and Dana. She let out a ferocious bark, the kind that sent shivers racing down my spine. It wasn't just a bark of warning, it was a command. "So, get out of the way, you stupid mutt," Dana hissed, trying to push Luna aside. But Luna didn't budge. Instead, she bared her teeth, a low growl rumbling from deep within her chest. Dana faltered, her hand freezing midair. "What's wrong with this dog?" she snapped, her voice tinged with fear. Claire reached out, her tiny hand brushing against Luna's fur as if drawing courage from the dog's unyielding presence. The sight of my daughter clinging to Luna while Dana loomed above them lit a fire in me. I stepped into the room, my voice cutting through the tension. "What's going on here?" Dana spun around, her face flushing with a mix of anger and panic. "Your dog is out of control," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at Luna. "She's aggressive, she nearly bit me." But I wasn't buying it. The scene before me told a different story. Luna stood protectively in front of Claire, her eyes locked on Dana like a sentinel guarding a treasure. Claire's cheeks were streaked with tears, her lip trembling as she clutched her bear tightly. "Claire," I said gently, kneeling beside her. "Are you okay?" Claire nodded hesitantly, her gaze darting between me and Dana. Luna stopped her. She whispered, her voice barely audible. My blood ran cold. I turned to Dana, my hands shaking with anger. "What did you do?" Dana's face twisted into a sneer. "Don't be ridiculous. I was just trying to help her with her exercises. The dog's the problem here, not me." But Luna didn't waver. She held her ground, her growl deepening as Dana took a step toward Claire. It was then that I realized Luna wasn't just reacting, she was taking a stand. She knew. She had always known. I pulled Claire's wheelchair back, creating space between her and Dana. "Leave," I said firmly, my voice shaking with fury. "No." Dana opened her mouth to argue, but Luna barked again, the sound reverberating through the room like a warning shot. Dana hesitated, her composure cracking as she backed toward the door. "This is insane," she spat, grabbing her bag. "You're making a huge mistake." The moment the door slammed shut behind her, I let out a shaky breath. Luna turned to Claire, her tail wagging gently as if to reassure her that the danger was gone. Claire reached out, burying her face in Luna's fur, and for the first time in weeks, I saw her relax. The aftermath of that moment unraveled a web of truths I had been too afraid to confront. That evening, I replayed the scene in my mind, each detail solidifying my decision to act. I called Greg at work, my voice trembling as I recounted what had happened. He was furious, not at me, but at himself for not noticing sooner. "I'll be home in 20 minutes, he said, his tone steely. "We're handling this together." When Greg arrived, we reviewed the security footage from the camera I had hidden in the living room weeks earlier. The evidence was damning. Dana's harsh words, her rough handling of Claire, the cruelty that had gone unnoticed, it was all there, laid bare for us to see. "We're calling the police," Greg said, his jaw tight. "And we're never letting someone like that near our daughter again." I nodded, my resolve strengthening as I looked at Luna, who lay by Claire's side like a guardian angel. "She saved her," I said quietly. "If it weren't for Luna—" Greg placed a hand on my shoulder, his expression softening. "She's not just a dog," he said. "She's family." In the days that followed, the authorities launched an investigation. Dana was charged with child endangerment, and while the legal proceedings were slow and grueling, I found solace in knowing she would never hurt another child again. But the true hero of the story was Luna. Her actions that day didn't just protect Claire, they brought attention to a darkness that might have continued unchecked. She had acted with a courage and intelligence that went beyond instinct, proving once again that she was more than just a pet. She was a protector, a beacon of light in the face of injustice. One evening, as I tucked Claire into bed, she looked up at me with a soft smile. "Luna's my best friend," she said, her voice filled with a quiet confidence I hadn't heard before. I stroked her hair, my heart swelling with gratitude. "She loves you, sweetheart," I said. "And she'll always be here to keep you safe." As I turned off the lights and stepped into the hallway, I glanced back at the room. Luna was curled up at the foot of Claire's bed, her watchful eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She met my gaze, and in that moment, I understood what she had been trying to tell me all along. The world might be full of threats, but with Luna by our side, we would face them together. Courage on 4 paws had saved us once, and I knew it would again if ever the need arose. The silence in the room was deafening as the officer finished playing the security footage. The images on the screen showed Dana's cruelty in stark, undeniable detail. Her harsh words, the rough way she handled Claire, the cold, calculated malice in her eyes. But what stood out most was Luna, our chocolate Labrador, stepping in time and again, her fierce protectiveness unshakable. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the couch as I glanced at Greg. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might shatter his teeth. Beside us, Ethan slouched in his chair, his usual teenage apathy replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. And Claire, my sweet Claire. She sat quietly in her wheelchair, her tiny hands gripping Luna's fur as if the dog was her anchor in a storm. "This," Greg began, his voice cracking. "This happened in our home?" I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing up, the weight of my guilt pressing down on me. I had hired Dana. I had trusted her with our daughter. And I had been blind to the evil lurking beneath her polished exterior. "This footage is more than enough evidence," the officer said, breaking the silence. He was a tall man with a kind face, but his eyes were hard as they met mine. "We'll make sure she faces justice." Justice. The word felt hollow, too small to encompass the damage Dana had done. But it was a start. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews and legal preparations. The case against Dana grew stronger with each revelation. Other families she had worked for came forward, sharing their own experiences of suspicion and discomfort. No one had solid proof before, but Luna's actions had brought everything to light. I became obsessed with the details. Every conversation with the investigators unearthed new horrors, whispered insults, physical neglect, even veiled threats. Dana had preyed on vulnerable children, hiding behind her charming smile and glowing references. And Claire, my daughter had borne the brunt of it. What kind of person does this? Greg asked one night as we sat in the kitchen, the weight of the day pressing down on us. His hands trembled as he held his coffee mug, the anger in his voice barely contained. A monster, I replied, my own voice hollow. I looked over at Luna, who lay near Claire's wheelchair, her head resting on her paws but her eyes alert. She knew, I added softly. Luna knew before any of us did. Greg nodded, his gaze softening as he watched the dog. She saved Claire, he said. And maybe others too. The court hearing was a nightmare. Dana sat at the defendant's table, her demeanor calm and composed as if she were the victim. Her lawyer tried to paint her as overworked, stressed, and misunderstood, a narrative that made my blood boil. But then the footage played. The courtroom fell silent as the videos showed Dana's true nature. The cruel words, the rough handling, the way she had sneered at Claire, mocking her disability and her helplessness. And then came Luna, stepping in with unwavering courage, her growls a warning, her barks a demand for justice. The reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed through the room, and Dana's calm facade cracked. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her lawyer leaning in to whisper urgently in her ear. But there was no denying the truth anymore. The evidence was irrefutable. She's a hero, one of the jurors whispered, nodding toward Luna, who sat obediently at my feet. I reached down to stroke her head, feeling a surge of gratitude for the dog who had done what I couldn't, protect my child when I failed. In the weeks that followed the trial, life slowly began to settle. Dana was convicted on multiple counts of child endangerment and abuse, sentenced to years behind bars. The relief was overwhelming, but it was tempered by the lingering guilt that gnawed at me. One afternoon, as Claire and I sat in the backyard, I decided it was time to talk about everything that had happened. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling beside her wheelchair. Claire didn't answer right away. She gazed out at the trees, her fingers absent-mindedly stroking Luna's fur. "Better," she said finally, "because Luna's here." I swallowed hard, tears stinging my eyes. "She's a special dog," I said. "And she loves you very much." Claire nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "She's my best friend." The impact of Luna's heroism extended beyond our family. News of her actions spread quickly, capturing the attention of local reporters and even national outlets. She became a symbol of loyalty and courage, her story inspiring countless people. One evening, as I scrolled through social media, I came across a message from another family whose child had been in Dana's care years earlier. They had always suspected something was wrong but had never been able to prove it. "Your dog is incredible," they wrote. "She gave us the courage to speak up." It was then that I realized Luna's impact wasn't just about saving Claire. It was about shining a light on the darkness that Dana had hidden for so long. Despite the media attention and the support from strangers, the scars Dana left on our family were slow to heal. Ethan struggled with guilt, blaming himself for not noticing what was happening to his sister. Greg threw himself into work, using his busy schedule as a shield against the pain. As for me, I found myself constantly second-guessing every decision I made. But through it all, Luna was there, a steady, comforting presence that reminded me of the strength we had as a family. One night, as I tucked Claire into bed, she looked up at me with an expression of quiet determination. "Mommy," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Luna didn't just save me. She saved all of us." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "She did, sweetheart. She really did." As I turned off the lights and stepped into the hallway, I glanced back at the room. Luna was curled up at the foot of Claire's bed, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She met my gaze, and in that moment, I knew we would be okay. Because no matter what challenges lay ahead, we had Luna, a protector, a hero, and the heart of our family. Months after the trial, life had settled into a tentative rhythm, but things were different. The shadows of Dana's betrayal still lingered in our home, weaving through the unspoken moments of guilt, pain, and healing. Yet, amidst it all, Luna's presence became the glue that held us together. Claire clung to her more than ever, and Luna responded in kind, shadowing her every movement like a guardian angel. Ethan, once indifferent to the dog he claimed was just a ball of fur, now took her on walks after school. Even Greg, stoic and detached in his grief, often paused to scratch her ears before heading out to work. But Luna wasn't just a source of comfort for our family anymore. She had become something more, a symbol. The first time I realized Luna's story had taken on a life of its own was when the email arrived. It was from a local advocacy group for children with disabilities. They had read about Luna in the paper and wanted to honor her at their annual gala. "This isn't just about Luna," the email read. "It's about what she represents: love, devotion, and the power to protect those who can't protect themselves." I hesitated. The attention had been overwhelming after the trial, and we were still trying to find our footing as a family. But something about the message stuck with me. Maybe, just maybe, Luna's story could do more than heal us. The gala was held on a crisp autumn evening in a grand hall draped in glittering lights. I wasn't sure how Luna would react to the crowd, but she handled it with her usual calm grace. She sat proudly beside Claire's wheelchair, her chocolate coat gleaming under the soft light of the chandeliers. The room was filled with parents, advocates, and children, some of whom had disabilities similar to Claire's. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as the event's host took the stage and recounted Luna's story. She didn't just protect a child, the host said, her voice breaking with emotion. She reminded all of us that love is an action, not just a feeling. And sometimes, the smallest acts of devotion can change lives. The room erupted in applause as Luna received a standing ovation. Claire beamed, her cheeks flushed with pride, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something shift inside me, a flicker of hope. After the gala, people began reaching out. Families who had experienced similar betrayals shared their stories. Activists used Luna's image in campaigns for better protections for children with disabilities. Even Ethan's classmates, who had once teased him for having a nerdy dog, began to see Luna as a hero. But the moment that truly changed everything came on a quiet Sunday morning. I was sitting on the porch with Luna, sipping coffee as Claire played with Ethan in the yard. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves, and the world felt peaceful for the first time in months. My phone buzzed. It was an email from a national nonprofit dedicated to child welfare. They had been inspired by Luna's story and wanted to launch a new initiative in her honor, a program to place therapy dogs in homes with vulnerable children. "We believe Luna's story has the power to spark change," the email read. "Her devotion is a reminder of the unwavering love that animals can provide, even in the darkest of times." Tears blurred my vision as I read the email aloud to Greg that evening. "This could actually help people," I said, my voice trembling. Greg nodded, his hand resting on my shoulder. "She's already helped us," he said. "Maybe it's time to share that with the world." The initiative, called Luna's Light, took off faster than anyone expected. Donations poured in, and soon therapy dogs were being trained and placed with families across the country. Each dog came with a small tag engraved with Luna's name, a reminder of the Labrador who had started it all. As the program grew, so did our family's involvement. Greg became an advocate, using his platform at work to raise awareness. Ethan volunteered to help train the dogs, finding a sense of purpose that had eluded him in the months after the trial. Claire blossomed. She began speaking at events, her voice small but steady as she recounted how Luna had saved her. "She wasn't just my protector," Claire said at one gathering. "She was my best friend. And she taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you love someone enough to fight for them." The audience erupted into applause, and as Claire looked down at Luna, the bond between them was palpable. But not everyone welcomed the attention. One night, as I was sorting through emails, I came across a message that made my blood run cold. "You think you're a hero," it read, "but you don't know the full story." The email was anonymous, but its implications were clear. It wasn't the first time I'd wondered if Dana might have accomplices, people who had enabled her or turned a blind eye to her actions. I forwarded the email to the authorities, but the unease lingered. What if the fight wasn't over? As Luna's Light continued to expand, we faced challenges that tested our resolve. One particularly devastating case involved a child who had suffered years of neglect at the hands of an unlicensed caregiver. When the therapy dog assigned to the family formed an instant bond with the child, it was a stark reminder of why we were doing this work. But it also reignited the fear. What if there were more Donnas out there, slipping through the cracks? Greg and I decided to use Luna's Light to advocate for systemic change. We partnered with lawmakers, pushing for stricter background checks and better oversight for caregivers. The work was grueling, but it was necessary. Through it all, Luna remained our constant. Her devotion didn't waver, her love unshaken by the weight of the world we were trying to change. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Claire nestled against Luna's side, I realized something profound. Luna wasn't just a hero for what she had done in the past. She was a symbol of what we could all aspire to be. Courageous, loyal, unyielding in the face of darkness. Years later, as I watched Claire walk across the stage at her high school graduation, Luna by her side, a small bandana draped around her neck, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Luna had changed our lives, but more than that, she had changed the lives of countless others. And as the crowd erupted in applause, I looked down at the chocolate Labrador who had started it all and whispered, "You're our light, Luna. And you always will be." The fight for justice and equality wasn't over, but with Luna's legacy guiding us, I knew we were ready for whatever came next. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Luna's story is a powerful reminder of the love, courage, and devotion that can change lives, even in the darkest of times. We would love to hear your thoughts about this story in the comments. Have you ever experienced or witnessed acts of racism or injustice? How did you handle those moments? Sharing your story could inspire and help others who might be going through something similar. Please know how much your support and engagement mean to us. Every comment, like, and subscription reminds us of the amazing community we have here. Your presence is truly appreciated, and we're so grateful for each and every one of you. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to stay connected with us and liking this post to help us share Luna's message with even more people. Wishing you a wonderful day filled with kindness, hope, and strength. Thank you for being part of our journey.